Immediately following the attacks on September 11, 2001, Hudson County's Waterfront became the hub for emergency personnel, volunteers, and over 200,000 survivors who were ferried from Lower Manhattan to the Jersey waterfront. Upon their arrival to the Jersey side, thousands were decontaminated, triaged, hospitalized, and given shelter. Nearly 700 citizens perished from the Garden State. New Jersey had a front row seat on September 11th, and for us, it was an even more visual impact looking out across the river to an empty skyline.
My name is Angelo Caprio. I'm the disaster coordinator for St. Mary Hospital, Hoboken, New Jersey. I'm a born and raised Hoboken guy.
My name is Mary D'Angelo. I am the nurse manager of the emergency room in St. Mary's in Hoboken. I was actually making rounds on pediatrics when I saw the first plane hit the Twin Towers. And I immediately rushed down to the emergency room where I was picked up by EMS supervisor, and I was brought down to the PAT station, and that's where I was stationed for the day.
My name is Marianne Meyer. I'm a registered nurse in the emergency room at St. Mary Hospital. I was working that day. I was in the emergency room, and we were taking care of patients that day. And we saw it on the news, actually, before anybody ever called us.
Mary Frances Murphy. I'm the assistant nurse and care coordinator for the emergency department. I was at home with my husband, and a report came on the TV. When things became more when things started to unfold that were not good, that the second plane hit, that's when I started to call staff from home to see if they could go in and start emergency planning and set up the staging area at the pier.
Well, I'm the task force leader in New Jersey Task Force 1. My name is James Riley. I retired from the New Brunswick Fire Department in 1997. And this is when we started this adventure. So we built it from just a few guys who were interested in doing something like this because we saw a need for it to what it is today.
My name's Dan Mitten. I'm a sergeant with the State Police of New Jersey. I'm assigned as the coordinator of the team for New Jersey Task Force 1 through our Office of Emergency Management. So when this happened, I obviously made contact with my commanders, my leadership at State Police Headquarters. They made the calls they had to make. They activated our state's Emergency Operating Center, the EOC. At that point, they called us back and said, okay, you're free to go up there to send an incident advance team to the city to find out what you need. From some phone calls we made with people up there, we knew what we were going to need right away, so we just made a decision to activate the team to start the ball rolling to get people here.
My name is Kathy Conlon. I'm a registered nurse. I work at the Burn Center at St. Barnabas in Livingston, New Jersey. And through my work at the Burn Center, I became involved with the New Jersey Task Force Urban Search and Rescue Team, where I'm the chief nurse logistics person responsible for overseeing the medical cache and helping to direct the health and safety and welfare of the team members.
Maurice Rolando. I'm a canine search specialist with New Jersey Task Force 1. I was actually working in Paterson, New Jersey on a building. We saw the smoke coming from the towers. I called down to Task Force headquarters to find out what happened. I was informed that a plane had hit the tower. While I was on the phone, they had mentioned a second plane that just came in and hit the tower. I was told to respond back home and stand by.
My name is James Pruden. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I couldn't meet the team at Lakehurst because I had to go and assure that my hospital was going to be able to function. We're in Paterson, so we're about 12 miles outside of the city.
At that time, I was emergency services medical director for the city of Jersey City and the county of Hudson. So I was the EMS medical director for Hudson County, essentially. I was also at that time chief of rheumatology at St. Vincent's Medical Center in Lower Manhattan. And on the day that all of this happened, I went from being at a clinic at St. Vincent's, which is roughly a quarter of a mile away and now closed, to coming to New Jersey on the PATH train as the first tower was hit. And then the second tower was hit as I emerged from the PATH tunnel on this side of the river.
I had the television on and I heard that a plane had hit one of the towers.
My plan was to get up and go over to our field hospital, which was set up at Path. And in the time it took me to get from here to the field hospital, Tower 2 had fallen.
And I just wanted to get there and see what was going on and see if we could help, you know.
And then we just loaded up any supplies that we can grab and carry with us to bring down there, gauze, ace wraps, burn stuff like Silvadene creams, things like that, because we didn't know what kind of patients we were going to be getting.
You know, the whole team went up there and we set up our base of operation in the Javits Center. We were the first USAR team there.
Our first real task there was to help New York Task Force set up their base of operations, get their team ready. Their team was obviously took a big hit. Their team is made up of their fire department and police department. A lot of their members died in the collapse that day or were missing at that point. And they didn't have the means right then and there to set up their tasks, to get their equipment ready off the tractor trailers and set their base of operations up. So we pretty much, I called back, got 50 of our members who at that point had responded to the Jacob Javits Center and had them come down to the scene, or on Chambers Street, just off of West, to help New York set up their base. And that's pretty much what we did for the first few hours.
Well, we had to organize a trauma unit so that we would have beds to take care of any of the injured. So I immediately spoke with Hoboken Fire Department, Hoboken Police, EMS, and St. Mary's. We all had to coordinate together to get all the equipment down there to set up a trauma center.
So I got here around 9:15, and I pulled up, and I had 2 paramedics and an EMT. The paramedics had already responded over here because they saw the commotion. The EMT came with 1 ambulance, and he was parked here, and we had no other help, and all of our beepers were down and our radios did not work. So there was no way I could call for help except to beg a police officer to tell everybody to get as much help as possible and to open the streets up to the hospital because I needed paramedics and EMTs from the Jersey City Medical Center.
We were at the field hospital. We put up 30 to 40 some odd stretchers, and we waited. We waited. And the ferry boats began to arrive with the walking wounded.
I know that 10,000 were triaged on the waterfront, decontaminated on the waterfront. I think 2,500 were triaged, which is an enormous amount at one given time. And 200 were transported to, or over 200 were transported to the 9 hospitals.
What we were getting were people coming home from work or trying to get to work. And so we were mostly just getting people just scared. They didn't know what was going on. So we were sitting them down, calming them down, trying to explain to them what they could do to go home if they could, and just trying to calm people down. We didn't really get any victims right away.
Gradually, more and more tugboats and more boats and barges and anything that could move across the water had patients on them. And these patients were fractured legs, pelvises. You know, people say there was nobody or very few people injured, but we saw a couple of hundred people who were pretty banged up.
We were the first team to get there with canines other than New York City. New York City's dogs were there, but New York City had lost a lot of their members of their FEMA team, their task force. So when we got there with our canines, these guys were just thrilled to have us there. They were so happy to see the dogs. But what was happening is as we would send our dogs to search, a fireman would grab our dog and start walking away with it and taking off to another area to search, not realizing that we were actually doing a search at that point. He just saw a dog and thought, let's bring it over here and see if we can find somebody.
The first thing we noticed, everyone was covered in that white powder that we all got to look at on TV. And we had decon already at the scene. And I picked up the phone. I called a friend of mine who's an environmentalist who, as a young man, had worked on those buildings. And I asked him, I said, Ken, do you remember if there's any asbestos? Did they remove it? And he said, Ann, just full of asbestos.
It was weird because people coming off the boats were totally gray. It looked like everybody was the same color. There was no race or gender because of all the soot and asbestos on them. So it was just weird for me to see that.
And then you were treating people with the smoke inhalation or dust inhalation or eye irritation, or some people were clearly suffering the psychological stress of what they just experienced, so you had to interact with those people as well. And that went on and on for a while.
They first hit the firemen, and the firemen would decon them, so they would hose them down. And then from there, they walked around the corner, and then that's when they met doctors and nurses, and we triaged them. We checked their lungs because we weren't sure if they were exposed to asbestos or if it was smoke inhalation. We weren't really sure what we were going to be getting, so we checked them from head to toe, and then we would tag them. If they could walk through, if they were fine, they went through. Some people had asthma attacks from the smoke, so we would send them off to a separate section for the asthma, and we didn't really have any serious victims, mostly just people in shock. We had crisis workers on board. They would speak to them and take care of them.
And we then drove directly to the city, where we were stationed in the Jacob Javits Center. That was our primary base of operations, or our BOO, where we set up tents, the hospital, and all of our supplies.
At first, Dr. Caprio, myself, and Mary D'Angelo were the only nurses. And ironically, people started showing up. People that were nurses that work over in New York that couldn't make it to work were just volunteering off the street. Doctors were showing up from medical center just volunteering. But it was at least 3 hours before anybody else. So Mary, myself, and Dr. Caprio were the only nurses and doctors there for at least 3 hours.
But one person came over that day in uniform. He put his uniform on when he found out we were under attack, and he tried to get to his reserve center, and he couldn't. And I remember his last name was Peoples, and his first name was Sergeant. I don't remember his first name. And he stayed there with us, and he was an LPN, and he worked, and he couldn't get communications to any of his family or anyone else, but he stayed there for at least 22 hours. I basically told him he had to leave because the guy just had to get home to his family because they had no idea where this man was.
Well, I think the biggest surprise on that day was when I turned around, my husband was right behind me. He is a construction worker, and he was working in North Bergen, so he never saw the Twin Towers come down. They had just heard it on the radio, and they shut his job down. He came right into Hoboken and got a hold of the EMS supervisor. When I turned around, he was right there in the ambulance, and he was the one that kept the communications going between the hospital and the triage site because none of the cell phones were working. So the only phone we had to keep in contact with the hospital was the phone in the restaurant right across the street. So we made him sit at the telephone because everybody knows his voice in the emergency room because he's always calling, looking for me. So for that day, that's what he did.
And we had no way of getting them off because we only had one stretcher. So people came down with office chairs. Sorry.
A mother who came off the boat had been deconned and was hysterical because she was pushing her child in a stroller and became separated from her child as the tower was coming down. And the amount of terror on her face, I have children, to think that you may have lost your child in something like this was beyond me, and I could see it in her face. And thankfully, the next boat, someone was there with her child, so that was a happy story, one of the few.
But to see the people coming out of the office buildings in droves with chairs that had wheels on them, because we were trying to get things to take people off the tip of the pier with Venetian blinds as splints to help, because we didn't have enough splints.
We arrived at the Jacob Javits Center around 1 o'clock. We were the first urban search and rescue team to get on site because we're the closest. We were asked by people in the New York City to please come in and assist. So naturally, because we had done some training with them, so they were aware of our role as a task force team. So we were here very early on, and we stayed for 10 days.
And at around 4 o'clock, Mickey McCabe, who was director of Bayonne's EMS at the time, we decided to take a caravan of ambulances and first went to the Port Authority headquarters, which is at the outset of the Holland Tunnel. And then I went up to, that's when I met, I believe I met Angelo Caprio in Hoboken. Prior to going over, we had them open the Holland Tunnel, and we took this caravan of about 20 ambulances with Mickey and I in the front. And my car has lights and sirens in it, so I was able to drive through the Holland Tunnel and go to the actual field hospital, which was at Chelsea Piers. It was Chelsea Piers 12, I believe. And we went there, and that was a huge field hospital with stretchers, anesthesiologists, gloved surgeons. Everybody was waiting for victims. There were no patients.
We deconned 10,000 some odd people. And to my knowledge, it's the world's largest decon.
I remember the look on the firemen's faces, the 1,000-yard stare.
We were pretty much on cruise control after that. 12-hour shifts. Whatever they called for us to do, we did. We were there to help. That's what it came down to. Discouraging, very discouraging for all of our members, I would say, most of the time, because you're there, you want to help, you want to find viable human beings. You want to find people that are alive. You do good.
As we were traveling down to Ground Zero on the buses, we would be in traffic and family members would be standing on the island along the, I think it's the Henry Hudson, and they were handing us photos. They were handing us toothbrushes, pillows to find their family, thinking that, you know, we could just walk in there with the toothbrush with the dog and say, here, go find them. And, you know, they had no idea what was down there. But, I mean, we would take the stuff because you couldn't look these people in the face and say no. So you took it and you put it in the truck knowing that you couldn't do anything with it. But it made them feel better. I think somebody was trying. So that was you know, that was rough too.
I was nonstop on the phone from 11 at that night till 11 o'clock the next morning. There were just, I mean, we had a list compiled of the people that we did treat, and that we had like a tentative list of the Hudson County hospitals, who was treated where, so we could refer to other hospitals in the area. And which is, you know, basically, you know, we knew the patients weren't going to be in these other hospitals, but we did give out the numbers for the other hospitals just in the hopes that, you know, somebody might show up someplace, or at worst, I mean, at best, to just keep the family busy, thinking they were doing something.
Part of the problem is our dogs, our task force dogs, are trained to find live victims. After the first 12 hours, it was pretty obvious that we weren't going to find live victims. You know, it was very, very thin chance of it. And our dogs basically became therapy dogs for the firemen on the pile. You know, it wasn't rare to find your dog with a fireman wrapped around it at some point. Just, you know, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, just hugging the dogs. It was it became a therapy for them, just to have the dogs there.
If we find the victims we find, they may not be alive, but we're giving closure to the family. We can't do anything about saving them, but at this point we can do something about saving the memory and helping the families, you know, get through this by knowing they were identified.
I was at the waterfront for 23 hours. In my mind, it took about 23 minutes. That's how quickly the day went. There was just so much happening.
I went there to help, and they want to call us heroes. The heroes are under the pile. The heroes are the families that have to deal with the aftermath. We were just there to do what we can.
Getting all these people from New York, making sure that they were all taken care of, making sure that they got home, making sure that the ones that were really sick were taken care of. I mean, anybody that came through, whatever they needed, it was there. We had food, water, you know, we told them where to go so they could make contact with relatives. I think it was just the whole situation. Everybody just worked together for that day.
The fire people, the police, the rescue people, the search people, the dogs, everybody did, you know, such a intense, unyielding, unquestioning, giving job that I couldn't have asked for a better experience.
We have some homeless people, as you know, who stay near the PATH station. And one of the gentlemen I know for years, he's been on the streets for years. And about an hour and a half into the whole ordeal, he comes up with a case of water. And I looked at him, he says, "Doc, I didn't steal this. Someone gave it to me to come over and give to you people." And I always handed him a buck whenever I saw him, and he said, "Not today, Doc. We all have to work today."
But I called my children and told them they have to be very proud of this country because of how everybody was willing to give. Store owners opened their store and just gave out their merchandise. People stood in lines to donate blood. Chiropractors, masseuses were down there willing to do stuff.
What impressed me the most about that day was the unity of the people that we were talking about, and people that were just average neighbors took sheets off their bed, clothes out of their drawers, socks that, might have been used and worn or whatever, but were clean, and they came to donate them. They donated toothpaste, water bottles, just average normal things at home, toilet paper, paper towels and things like that. Area restaurants donated food. They believed that we were having like a lot of people milling about that would need to be fed, and just average people in sometimes a cynical area. We live in cynical times, and people just gave of themselves like I've never seen before.
One of the things I concentrated on in my photographs, I felt like the world was falling down around us. We didn't know what was happening next. We didn't know if we were going to be attacked or what was going on. And I really tried to concentrate on the beauty and the unity. The sun rose the next day. The sun set. And September 11th was really a beautiful, beautiful day. You couldn't ask for a more beautiful day. So I held a black box in front of my face, and I tried to concentrate on that beauty and not show the destruction. We all know the destruction was going on. And if you were here, you heard it, and you smelled it, and you saw the smoke. And but there was something else that was going on, the way people came together. That beauty, there was no sex, no gender, no race, no age, no color, no nothing. Everybody was, excuse me, please, thank you, you first. And that was what I was trying to find, trying to focus on that. When I looked out across the skyline, I was waiting for the smoke to clear and the towers to be there.
Questions of the ages.